I want to do the best job that I can do on any best given day and be proud of the thing that I put out at the end.
Yeah.
Because that thing that you're proud of will lead on to the next thing. Because if you're not proud of what you're doing now, or the thing that you are about to put out into the world in front of everybody, then why would you go and get something else?
Yeah.
You know, the day that you give up is the day you might as well start to retire.
Steven, welcome to Empathy Led. How are you, my friend?
Hi. I'm good, Junior. How are you?
I'm doing really well.
Really good.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah, long time.
Yeah.
Long time.
I want my audience and my listeners to get a little bit of context about who you are and the path that led you here. And for me, one of the things that I found so fascinating about us as human beings and the way we connect and interact with other people is that fundamentally we have no direct access to each other's identity, right? We have no direct access to who people truly are, their thoughts, their fears, their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations. And all we do really is stitch together partial information that we collect at different touch point, at different interaction, and their social media profile to create a coherent story about them. And many a times we get it wrong. So I want to hear from you how you put together the pieces of your life puzzle that allow us to get a coherent understanding of who you are as a person and the path that led you here.
That's one hell of a big question to start with. Great question, though. So, how I got here, I've gone through life just bumbling along, to be honest, and I still am to this day. If somebody asks me who I am or what I do for a living, I can't really answer it. I'm full-time employed with an organisation called the ECITB, which is the Engineering Construction Industries Training Board. I won't go into detail on that because it's a minefield. But realistically, all I've ever done is had a clear focus and a clear understanding of end users. So I work in technology a lot. And I have worked in ed tech, so education technology, for 15 years or so now.
Wow.
And I help products thrive and succeed and people and make people want to use them, and not through the technology ways that everybody probably refers to when they're thinking about social media and things like that, but in different ways, in making sure that the proposition's right, that it's not trying to tread on anybody's toes, that it's there as a supportive tool for people in education. And that's how I got to this point. I'm at an organisation now where I'm trying to help change the way that people in the engineering construction industries train, so they can focus on training more on net zero, and also transferring their skills from their current job roles in oil and gas into the renewables sector or into the nuclear sector, where it's going to be future energy. We can't just switch oil and gas off and things like that at the moment, because the world would collapse. You know, if we did things like that, we wouldn't be able to produce medicines for the next 15 years. More people would die, would move back to the medieval ages. And I think, you know, there's a lot of talk around switching off old fossil fuels and things like that. I 100% agree. That's what we need to move towards. But if we just did it, it would just, we wouldn't survive as human beings because of how we are. It is so ingrained in our day-to-day lives. Mm-hmm. So me focusing on that end user, me having empathy with the world, and not just people, but the planet itself. My empathy side is to try and help fast track the training and understanding of the sectors and of the skill sets of the people across the world, so they can help save the world a little bit quicker. And my own personal purpose for everything is the government setting these targets of net zero for 2050 or 2045 in the UK, in Scotland, in the UK. If I can help bring that down by 6 months or a year, so it becomes 2044 or 2049 when we reach net zero, then I've helped the world by 1 year, which means I've helped everybody in this world by 1 year.
Wow. Wow. Well, it was in fact a big question, but what an answer. What an answer.
Thanks.
Yeah. So many moving pieces there. The piece that I want to start with is when you look at how the dots connect backwards.
Yeah.
What is the through line that stitches together your bumbling around life and your different career path? And is there a common stitch that pulled all of those pieces together?
Yeah. So I would say there's probably, there's a thread, more two threads intertwined realistically.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm gonna say three actually, if I can remember them. When I've said the two, if I can't remember the third, then it'll be two, but there'll be three. So the first thread, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. When I was at school, I was dreaming of playing football. I wanted to play football all my life. I looked out the window. I did not pay attention at school. And then I went to go work. I went to go and work on a building site afterwards. So I was a painter and decorator for many years. And I went into an apprenticeship, and I got my qualifications that way. And then as soon as I finished my qualifications, I needed more money. And my company that I was at the time, decorating, wouldn't pay me more money. So I went and set up a business by myself. And that was at the age of 19.
Wow.
Setting up a business by myself in painting and decorating. I'd met my wife, my wife, who I'm with to this day. I was going to say current wife. That sounds like I'm going to leave her. I'm not. But I met my wife at college after school, where I went to go and study art for a year. And what I would have been 17. I met her at the age of 17. Wow. And she had gone to university in Nottingham. I was in Lincolnshire at the time, and we got together as a couple. And she said to me, "Just move over to Nottingham." So I moved my business over to Nottingham as well, and I found it hard. For the first 9 to 12 months, there was no work, to the point, we had a really rough time. No money coming into the house. All these debts landing on your doorstep, to the point I had to fold the company. I couldn't succeed. And people don't tell you about these things, but as a sole trader, it doesn't go against the company name, it goes against your name as a person. So I was in trouble for many years thereafter because of the decisions that I made when I was young, trying to get more money. One of those threads, though, is I think you have to have gone through some of the hard times to realize the good times. I look back on those times now and go, I can't believe that was me all those years ago. Would I make the same decisions now? Probably. I probably still would. Yeah. But actually, I think after you've gone through the hard times, you can understand why you made those decisions. The other thread that runs consistently through thereafter is taking the chance. So when we realized that I had that much debt and all these bad things were happening, there was an advert in the local paper to go and teach at the local college. And they needed people to be able to teach construction. At the time, I just got married. I was 23. My wife said, "You need to apply for this." When we looked, the job had actually closed. But I rang up the number on there. My wife made me ring the number on there. And for some unbeknown reason, I got through to the vice principal. What? And that just doesn't happen. There's usually like so many different, stage gates to get through to somebody like that. I spoke to the vice principal and he said, "Look, the job's closed, but can you please come in tomorrow so we can speak to you?" So I walked in the next day. I had to go and buy a suit that morning because I didn't have a suit. Walked in the next day and I got offered a job that afternoon.
Wow.
And that was the beginning of the journey. I took a chance on ringing that number. I just happened to get to the right through to the right person. I was also very fortunate that through that first part of this new career path that I was, starting to drive out in education, everybody liked my temperament and they liked me as a person. So I got so many opportunities. And I read a book by Danny Wallace called Yes Man, which got made into a film later with Jim Carrey in it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the film is quite far removed from the book, but if you read the book, it's actually an adventure that Danny Wallace goes on for 1.5 to 2 years, where he just says yes to everything. And I adopted that mantra. So for the first 4 years of being in education, I just said yes to everything. Every qualification that they wanted to throw at me, every opportunity for a new job role, anything like that, I just said yes. And it has now made me become the person that I am today. I say yes more than I'd ever say no. I have to say no to some things because I've now got 2 kids and you have to say no to them, right? But most of the times it's a yes, because saying yes provides opportunity. Saying no actually closes down opportunity.
No, I love that. I love that so much. And it does truly give us a lot of context about who you are and how you arrived here, and some of the lessons that you picked up along the way that I'm sure are still informing how you show up in this world and the contribution that you want to make within it. So there seems to be then a constant in your opening answer. You talked about that fundamentally, really, your job is centered around education. It's about teaching people. What I heard is you help people, you teach people how to learn.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's a hard one to actually build a proposition and contextualize.
Which is why I wanted to actually bring up, right? In a world where information is abundant and we have access to it at our fingertip, the hardest thing to do then, and the most important skill it seems to develop, is to learn how to learn, right? So what are some of the things that we need to understand about that proposition in order for us to become better learners in a world where information is abundant?
So it's a really good question, and it's one that I battle with on a daily basis.
Sure.
The key fundamental is information requires your attention, right? The key information requires your attention. So in the world that we live in now, with the TikToks and the Snapchats and all these different social media filters that we've got over our lives, it's not requiring any of your. Actually, it's so quick. The micro bursts that are happening, you're not actually learning from. You're making decisions in 1 to 2 seconds rather than what would have been 30 to 40 seconds 10 years ago. So yes, there's a lot more information out there, but it's very easy to pass up on it very quickly. Actually, to learn, you've got to have an interest in what you're wanting to read or watch or understand. Now, that requires knowing yourself. And that's a key piece of empathy. So for me, when we talk about understanding empathy with others, the only way that I can understand empathy with others is if I know my own unconscious bias first. Because I will automatically jump to decisions about TikTok videos because I'm not of the generation of TikTok. But my unconscious bias means actually I might be making the wrong decision. So every time we start looking at a new product or a new service that's involved inside EdTech, you have to look at the current market trend and then go, I might not be the best person to answer this. The best person to answer it is the end user. So speaking to the end user, understanding the research, understanding the data requirements behind it, bringing that back in so I can do my job, which is actually understanding the end user and then starting to make the product fit properly to it, is the critical bit. And that's how you get learners to learn and to want to learn. It's about being in the right place with the right thing at the right time.
Yeah. And that naturally requires empathy. Like, it naturally forces you to flex your empathy muscle when that's the framework that you use. You know, for me, the thing that I obsessed about is this idea that you will be hard pressed to find someone who disagrees with the proposition of you need to put your customers first. You need to act in the best interest of the customer. But in practice, it is a very, very difficult thing to do, and it's actually rare to find companies and brands that live by that mantra. So for me, the thing that is this is always fascinating, and I'm beginning to put together pieces of an answer to this. I think the reason it's so hard in practice is because we are asking people to be empathetic when we should be designing a new framework where empathy is the default.
Yeah.
Because when you are asking people to be empathetic, then it requires energy, it requires effort. And if you had a good night of sleep, and if you are happy, and if your kids are healthy, and if your boss is a nice person, then you might be able every day to flex your empathy muscles. But the moment something happens, the moment you're having a bad time, the moment your boss becomes an asshole or you have a deadline, we naturally revert back to what the norm is. So for me, like, this is that's what I loved about your answer, is that because the framework is, we are not we are not able to build this thing unless we understand the end user. For me, that's a framework that naturally, like, forces you to be empathetic because it's baked into the approach and it's baked into the system.
Yeah, it's hard for me because I don't see it as a framework, and I think as a business world, you know, we try and we like things to be easy, and we like things on one page, and we like things on a canvas, or we like things inside a PowerPoint presentation, or whatever it is. We want things, one part of a journey to lead to another part of a journey, and there must be a start and there must be an end, right? I think in empathy with others, there is no end. There is no end. Your product has a start, and your product has an end, and your product has a life cycle, and your product needs to be maintained, or your service does. But actually, empathy never ends. You're always continually learning about other people's viewpoints, right? I think I know myself quite well now, but I still have to work every day about understanding why I'm making decisions in certain ways. Now, a lot of that is through past experience, or it's through the way that you was brought up as a child. It's all those things that have happened in past is what makes you make the decisions the way that you make them today. You might have been trained a certain way. You might have been brought up a certain way. Until you can realize and understand every detail about yourself, you'll never be able to be empathetic. So when it comes to those big brands who say that they're empathetic, unless every single person working towards that can 100% categorically sit there and say, I know myself inside and out, and I know the reasons why I make my decisions, and I know this is my unconscious bias speaking against my true bias, then they will never be fully empathetic.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I always say that the starting point to empathy is self-awareness. And for me, in my personal experience, the way it materializes is that I just realized that the more and the deeper I knew and understood myself, the more I was able to hear and see myself in other people. Even when the experience didn't mirror mine exactly, I could just see in me the same hopes and dreams and aspiration, as well as the same fears, the same insecurities, the same faults. And they of course express themselves in different ways, but the more I paid attention, the more I realized that it was just a different manifestation of the same stuff, the stuff that connect us as people, and really connect this human experience that we are all having.
It's crazy, isn't it? Like, it's so interesting when you start getting into that human, biological, and chemical piece. We are all made of the same atoms. We are all made of blood, water, skin, everything, right? We're all the same, yet we all have different levels of empathy for others.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it mesmerizing that we can all have these personalities that all think completely differently. You know, you could know somebody, Junior, and I could know somebody, and we could both have a completely different viewpoint of that person, yet they are one person, yet we both have a different view. Our brains are so scary that I know we don't know enough about them, but how we make connections inside our brains go, oh, I'm going to believe this about that person, where somebody else would have a different connection and go, well, I'm going to believe this about that person. It's crazy, all that psychological stuff.
One of the many things I find fascinating about you and your background, and even the context that you gave us about the path that led you here, is that you live at the intersection of humanities and science, of art and science. And I always envy people that have that. I feel like most people, we have this, and I think it's a false dichotomy of, the left brain and the right brain. You either, I think it's a false dichotomy. It's more a spectrum than a duality that is strict. But like there are few people in this world that truly live at the intersection of both of those things. And I think those people have a superior understanding of how the world works. And I think it's a superpower that enables them to make this world a better place, because they not only understand the subtleties and the spiritual things that make us human, but then they understand the technology that will allow us to actually make and affect the change that we seek to happen in this world. So it's clear, at least based on the story that you told, that it was quite an accident, that you started with this, more artistic thing, and then talk to us about that transition when you started as a painter, and then education, and then when did you transition into technology?
So, well, I got involved in technology must have been about 12 years ago now, possibly a bit longer, might have been 14. I'd actually left the college by that point, and I'd been to another organization for like 9 months. But in those 9 months that I was there, I realized that actually I'm more of a creative than I thought. So they had a model of delivery, and I walked in there and I said, well, this just doesn't seem right, the way that you're doing it. Let's flip it on its head and do it a different way. And we did that straight away and started making really good profit from like me being there 3 months later. It turned into a profitable business, part of the business. And I was like, oh, perhaps there's something there that I see things in a different way, So at the time, when I was at the college, I'd done a deal with an organization where I said, look, we will offer all your qualifications if you help us market them. And they'd never been asked that before. And it never happened, because I'd left by the point any real information started to be transferred across. But that stuck in their mind. They thought I was cheeky enough to have asked a question, and they went, there's something in him for asking that, because we've never been asked that before in our lives. And I got a phone call just saying, I've got a job going, I'd really like you to apply for it. And it was all around building propositions for their technology part of the business. So I went along and did the interview. I live in Nottingham, and it was working in London 3 days a week, so it's something that I didn't really want to do, but needs was must. And I went through the interviews and I got offered the job role. And I stayed at that company for 4 years. But whilst I was at that company for 4 years, I had 4 different jobs as well, because what was happening is they were finding products that weren't quite working out, digital products, and going, Steve, go in there and please go sort it out for us. So that's what I did. And I started to then find my way. But at the same time, I realized that propositions is the basic fundamental for marketing. So my next role after that, again in education, is I went to another organization where I was again headhunted for, and we rebranded them. So it was an 18-month project. It was £1 million, and we branded them. But none of it fazed me. It was great. I fell out with that company pretty much before the launch. which I won't go into because this just doesn't need to be discussed. And then COVID hit, and I had 6 months out. I had 6 months off, and it was beautiful. It was so nice to have 6 months as a bit of respite. The only thing that was ever in the back of your mind was, have I got enough money to survive on without doing any work?
Yeah.
So in that time, I started up a little consultancy in helping organisations, and I only wanted to help micro and small organisations. I wasn't bothered with big corporates or anything like that. And it was to help organisations that were trying to make a difference. And I still help a couple of those to this day. So there's an organisation who are trying to help social mobility in universities, so people realise that they can go into any job role that they want thereafter. That was also around the time of the George Floyd Black Lives Matter. That was all happening at the same time as helping them create a product and also helping them support their brand to help these people in universities to realise that they have every opportunity that they ever want to go into. So I still help them to this day. And then after them 6 months, I got approached by the company that I'm at now, just saying, can you come and help us sort this out? COVID's hit. We don't know what we're doing with anything online. We need to build a strategy and then release stuff. Can you come and help us? And I walked in and just helped with that strategy writing in the first 3 months. And then from that day, we were prototyping and testing, which we did over about a year period to get it right. You know, it's an audience that I've never really talked to before. I've never really understood. There's a lot of research, a lot of questions, a lot of meetings with lots of people in the sector. And we released it in January this year. And the sector has around 230 companies in there that we deal with, and 70 have already adopted the system within the first 5 months. So I know the proposition's right. I know that users are using it. I know that people are training. So yeah, we're doing the job that needs to be done.
Yeah. In there so many times our strength are unknown even to us. It's things that are just part of who we are, and it's quite often difficult for us to articulate or even recognize until somebody else points it out that, like, this is a thing that you do. Have you noticed that this is a thing that you do? So the reason I bring that up is, what is it about you that makes you capable of looking at a problem that people have been staring at for months and years and almost immediately recognizing what needs changing?
There's nothing special about me, Junior. And I say that wholeheartedly. There really isn't. I said earlier, you don't know empathy until you know yourself. There's one thing that I really don't know about myself to this day, which is I still don't know what I do. I feel like I'm looking out every time. I'm going, well, this is lucky that this has happened. I don't have a framework. I see every problem as its own individual problem. I wish I could give a better answer and say, look, you know, this is a life-changing moment for anybody who's listening to this. You know, the meaning of life's 42. I've got no clue. I've got literally no clue. I think I'm a good listener. I am a good listener, and also, in a way, I'm quite a good bullshitter as well. You know, I can sit in a room and I can hold my own with most people. So I think just having empathy with others and knowing what you can and can't do. You know, if somebody says to me, Steve, we need to make this happen, and I don't know it, I will sit there and go, I don't know it. I'm sorry, I can't help you, or I don't know it, but actually it interests me enough to go and understand it. And if you're always open and honest from the front, you'll always make waves one way or another. I've been very fortunate that they've mainly been positive rather than negative.
I mean, when I listen to you and I try to articulate what that thing is, it seems to me, you alluded to it earlier when you talked about the importance of having self-awareness to understand your unconscious bias. And I think the reason you want to understand your unconscious biases is so that you can set them aside, and so that they don't poison or get in the way of you trying to have a conversation with someone, listen to someone, or look at the problem with a beginner's mind and beginner's eyes, without trying to impose upon this new problem your preconceived notions or your past experiences. And I think at least part of it, as I listen to you, is your power. Is this ability to be able to suspend your judgment and to look at the problem with beginner's mind, setting aside your past experience, not jumping too early at trying to solve the problem, but genuinely being curious and trying to understand what is actually going on, and which is a beautiful parallel in how we interacting with human beings, right? Because that unconscious bias and that judgment is always in our mind. We listen to answer, we listen and we are formulating an answer already. And it's the same kind of disturbance that happens when you are trying to solve a problem, where you arrive at a problem with an already made solution or with an idea of what you think the solution should be, which then sabotages the work before it even begins.
Well, if I just jumped straight in and just kept pushing out solution after solution after solution, I'm not only wasting my time, but I'm wasting others as well. What's the point? What is the point? And I know people have made careers off it, but I couldn't live with myself. Why would you? I would never want to. It's kind of interesting that you say that, because now it starts making me think back again. Why would you ever want to get to the point where you're doing such a bad job because you've not understood what the actual problem is, that you're going to end up with somebody knocking on your door or somebody ringing you up saying this isn't good enough? Why put yourself in that position? You know, I don't want to be back where I was when I was 18, 19, with people going, you don't know what you're doing, the business hasn't worked, actually you owe us a load of money. Why would I do that? I want to do the best job that I can do on any best given day and be proud of the thing that I put out at the end.
Yeah.
Because that thing that you're proud of will lead on to the next thing. Because if you're not proud of what you're doing now, or the thing that you are about to put out into the world in front of everybody, then why would you go and get something else? Yeah. You know, the day that you give up is the day you might as well start to retire.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many reasons why, many people do it, and so much of it is, one, it's unconscious. So much of it isn't. Yeah, so much of it is, to your point, lack of self-awareness, lack of understanding of oneself and our biases, and right. And then there is ego plays a huge role to this, right? Like, I am afraid of arriving at this problem and admitting that I don't understand it, that I don't have an answer, right? There is a level, and you touched on that earlier, there's a level of honesty that comes with trying to solve a problem, like starting with I don't know. And I don't know, just like saying yes to me opens opportunity. If you know, case closed. If you don't know, then it opens up the opportunity to go and learn and research and ask and probe and all of those things.
But even if you know, right, you may have known in one scenario, but this scenario might be completely different. And that's the bit. This cookie cutter approach to everything, these gurus that are out in the world and things like that, just because it worked for one person once doesn't mean it's going to work for another person again. You've still got to do the work behind it to understand that new person, because they're a completely different person to who you were dealing with before.
Yeah, and that's it, really. That's the work. Like, that's the work. The research, that is the work. Because, whenever I start a new project, a brand project, I always have a little bit of apprehension about, am I going to be able to pull this off, regardless of how many I've successfully completed. But then I have to remind myself that the answers that you came up with, you didn't create them. You uncovered them in the work. You uncover them in the research, in the probing, in the asking, in the observing, you uncover the answer. So it's not something that you have to create. You have to uncover it. And it requires to do the work, just like you described it.
The work bit is critical. I know we all want a silver bullet. We all want to have this thing where we think it's going to take us 4 years to do something, but actually it only takes us 1 year or what have you. If you do it in a much shorter time frame, actually you're not gonna feel as good about it anyway.
Yeah.
It probably means you have cut some corners, or you've skipped some jumps.
Yeah.
And actually doing that base level every time ensures that whatever you do, even if your product doesn't take off or your service doesn't happen, at least you can sit back at the end and go, well, I gave it everything. Yeah. My companies would mind if a product failed, but if I built my own product and released it and it failed, then at least I'll be able to sit back and go, well, I thought I had it. Yeah. I thought I had it, but obviously just didn't do enough of the research in the right area to understand that end user or that end customer. Or the world might have moved on, or I just might be too late for it, or I might be too early. I mean, that's happened a couple of times. Yeah. You know, it's really, I'm going to say something quite controversial here. When you look at people like Elon Musk, you know, is he just too early for his time? Is he too early for all of us in the world, where we all go that he's unhinged and things like that? I sit back sometimes and go, I think he's just misunderstood a lot of the time. How many other people in this world are trying to push the boundaries like he's doing? Don't get me wrong, I don't like the man. I don't like the way that he acts. I don't like how he treats his staff or anything like that. But I like that he has these moonshot ambitions, and he's trying to do the research to understand if it could actually happen or not. I find that quite interesting. And if you actually put it in the same way as going, well, Steve Jobs was very similar. Bill Gates was very similar. There was no such thing as computers beforehand, but they had these moonshot things. Actually, there's something in that creative humanity side, like you said. I don't see myself as that, because I always wait for people to say what they think about me rather than me trying to superimpose what I think I am to them. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing as I'm a massive fan of Simon Sinek.
Yeah.
And it's that whole thing of, if somebody stands in front of you and says, I am a leader, then they're not a leader. Because the only person who can tell you that a leader are the people that you are trying to lead. If they say you're a leader, you're a leader. If you're enforcing that you're a leader upon them, you are not.
Yeah.
And I never sit there and say, I have that many different job titles. I still don't know. I've never had a clear job title that actually feels right for me. Yeah. At the minute, I'm classed as a service designer. But service design is very tech-based. It's very UX and UI focused. I don't spend so much time on UX and UI. You know, it's more about end user gains and research analysis and piloting and platforming and things like that. So I always wait for people to tell me what they think I am rather than me telling them what I think I am.
Yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, you are an innovator, you are an empath, and you are a human-centered designer, somebody who understands who we are as people, the things that drive us, that motivate us, that makes us tick, and then design solutions to help us make progress in our respective lives. So, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, you nailed it there pretty much. Good.
So I know, at least as of late, and I don't know how far back it dates, because I was doing a little bit of research in preparation for this conversation, and I saw there is this big push you are making around kidney health, and you are trying to raise some awareness and some money. Can you touch on that a little bit? What the initiatives are, what has that been about, and how can others support you in that quest?
Thanks. I didn't realize he was going to bring this up. It's quite interesting. So when my family's got a lot of kidney disease. My father had one kidney removed about 25 years ago, and has now got one kidney left, because of course you're born with two. But that one kidney that he's got left is working at 8. And that 8% means that he has to go on dialysis 3 times a week for 4 hours a time. Excuse me. So he's been on dialysis now for 5 years or so. And to see your father go through that is quite hard. But my sister, she was born with one kidney. My brother was born with a kidney that was blocked. My uncle, who's my dad's brother, he's just gone into renal failure, so he's got a failing kidney.
Wow.
And it's like one of the, I think it's the 8th biggest killer in the world, but nobody really talks about it. And yet we've all got 1 or 2 kidneys.
Oh.
So I've been raising money for kidney charities for probably around 5 years now. Kidney research was the one that I raised it for pre-pandemic, and post-pandemic I've been raising money for kidney care. And the reason that I chose kidney care this year is they align their services to help kidney patients now, not just for stopping kidney disease in future, but kidney care now. So they've been helping people on dialysis stay alive through the cost of living increase and the crisis. So some dialysis patients are able to dialyse at home, but to dialyse at home, you've got to use electricity. And there are people out there who are choosing to either heat and eat or save their own life. And they're having to choose dialysis or food. And I just wanted to try and make a difference for them and raise money towards it. So I set myself the challenge this year of running the London Marathon, completing the London Ride 100 and the Swim Serpentine 2-mile swim in Hyde Park in London.
Wow.
Completed the London Marathon 5 weekends ago. So that's the first time I've ever run a marathon. I started running because of Tim, as we alluded to Tim earlier. And I started in COVID because I was more of a cyclist.
Okay.
But the ride is this weekend. It's this Sunday, 100 miles around London and Essex. And then the swim is in September. And so far I've raised just over £2,000 for kidney research. But I was part of a kidney warrior group at the London Marathon. There was 57 of us in the group, and we've raised over £120,000 for kidney care. Wow. Just by doing the London Marathon, which I'm really proud of. I'm especially proud of it.
Yeah. First of all, I'm sorry to hear about your dad and everything else with the family and the people that you come in contact with. And to your point earlier, like this is completely something that I never even understood the gravity of until this very moment. You know, it's quite
It's interesting. Like, so when you start thinking of empathy, Junior, and like running the London Marathon, right? It's not about you. It's just not about you. And do you know what the London Marathon's about? It's about there's 57,000 people run the London Marathon this year. I think it was 57,000. 35,000 of those were running for a charity.
Wow.
Right? And 35,000 people were all trying to raise funds for a charity for something that has happened in their life. That may be cancer, it may be leukemia, it may be Great Ormond Street Hospital, it might be mental health, it may be any of these charities. Something's happened to that individual to want to get up off their sofa on a Sunday morning when it's hammering it down with rain and to go and run 26 miles to raise money for somebody else who they don't even know.
Yeah.
That's empathy.
Nice.
That's understanding something else without not really understanding the reason why you're doing it. And that's why I do the challenges. I do them for myself as well. Don't get me wrong. You know, I know myself. Actually, I need challenges. Otherwise, I would turn into a bit of a Fruit Loop at home, and my wife would probably leave me for being that annoying. And I need challenges for my own mental health as well.
Yeah.
I need that thing that I can chase. But being in those scenarios, so Ride 100 this weekend, there'll be 27,000 people there, and 10,000 of those will be raising money for charity. They're doing it for something bigger than themselves. And I find that I get goosebumps every time I think of it. I really do. To know that the London Marathon, since its incarnation, has raised over £1 billion worth of funds for charity is just huge.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I remember a few years ago, my sister-in-law ran her first marathon, and it was the New York Marathon, and we were there
Yeah.
to support her. And because she was in it, and she was at the time working for a stock company, we had access to, you know, the finish line, and we had really, really good seats. So I had a front row to really witnessing the beauty and the power and the resiliency of the human spirit. I was so emotional. I did not anticipate that event to affect me and to impact me and to move me the way it did, to see people of different races and gender and causes, and, you know, some people with physical disability. You know, there was a man who ran the whole marathon juggling 2 basketballs. There were people, you know, in their 70s and 80s, and it was just such a beautiful exhibition of what human beings are capable of. And of course, there were people raising money and all of that. That whole environment was one of the most inspirational things I've ever witnessed. So
those days in that atmosphere, they make you realize that being human's worthwhile. They really do. There's a lot of times when you sit there and go, God, being human shit. You know, all the politics that fly around, all the, you know, the way that we're destroying the world, all these different things, it's bad news all the time. And then for that one day or that 1 millisecond when you sat there and everything suddenly makes sense, that people are all here to support each other and they're all trying to just do the best on behalf of somebody else. And I do every time. I get goosebumps, and I hope to do it again one year. Hopefully I'll be fortunate enough to.
Well, I couldn't have scripted a better end to this conversation. I will make sure to include in the show notes links to kidney care and really make sure that I put some spotlight on this important cause that you are a part of.
Thank you. They would really appreciate it.
Yes,
they would really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Tim, this has been not Tim, Steve. This has been an absolute pleasure. As I expected, I am so grateful that our paths have crossed. And I am a big fan of yours, of your work, of your mind, the way you see the world, and the way you choose to show up in it. So thank you for being here, and thank you for this conversation.
Thank you for having me on.